No, just your fun side.
Welcome.
It's not necessarily dark.
Yes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Here, yep, that looks good. Well, I thought before I actually started the text itself, I would show you something that I was able to come across, which I thought was helpful because we were talking about measurements, right? Liquid measures and dry measures. And here they are mentioned. So liquid measures a core, large amount, and a bat, and tells you actually the equivalent, modern measures, right? A hin, and whether in liters or gallons, and then a log. So this would be a log, this would be a hin, this would be a bath, and this would be a core. So it tells you, but the measurements aren't that easy to remember, right? That there are 12 logs to a hin and 6 hins to a bath and 60 hins to a core. And then here are the dry measures, a chomer, and in some cases, right, an ephah. We hear this, right? A se'ah, an omer, a kav, and I have something in the middle of my, yes. Oh, a quart. Well, okay. I don't think that's a modern measure, period, but you'd think, right?
It's just there for
to give you a sense, right. So even trying to remember these measurements, right? Even the names of the measurements and how one is bigger than the other, et cetera, isn't so easy. You have to intentionally do that. So at any rate, I thought that might be helpful. And here we are. So we are involved here in the bringing of the various, the decision to bring the various parts of the components of the raw materials for the construction of the tabernacle. That we divide this up so carefully, we deconstruct this so carefully. And I think, of course, the attempt is to make it as real, quote, quote, as possible. So here we go. So we were reading about how the princes had brought the onyx stones and the stones for the choshen, to fill the choshen. And going on now, ve'et habosim, the spices, ve'et hashamin, and the oil, lamaor, for lighting. In other words, u'leshemen hamishcha, and the oil for anointing, ve'liktoret hasamim, and for the incense, the spices for the incense. I'll just give you a quick grammatical point here. It's not a big one, but we just came across, right? You see the word hashamen, right? And you notice the little wishbone underneath. So that little wishbone, for those of you who don't know about the Ta'amei Mikra, for the little cantillation marks for chanting the Torah, this is the midpoint of the sentence. And so normally the word is shemen, as you see here, it means oil. Shamin is called pausal form because this is the major pause in the sentence. And this is a sof pasuk right here. This tells you the end of the sentence. So this, of course, is not in a Sefer Torah. If you were taking a Torah out of the Ark and looking at it, you would not see print that looked like this. For one, there's a special print that's used in the Sefer Torah, nor would you see any of these little cantillation marks. So that if you want to read from the Torah accurately, chant from it accurately, you have to memorize the cantillation. But the way the sentences, of course, the way the sentences are divided up, the punctuation, essentially, this is also punctuation. So this is a secondary pausal, but it doesn't have the value of this particular pausal mark. Yeah, go ahead.
So I may have been distracted yesterday because that has been happening even more since I moved, but I don't remember doing the text in Rashi's for 26 and 27?
So I will remind you the one that we talked about. Rashi asked, why did the princes wait for such a long time? Why did they bring it at the end of the gifting here? And yet when it came to dedicate the tabernacle, they were the first to bring gifts for the dedication of the tabernacle. Rashi discussed that.
And you did
the memory.
the one about the women spinning on the back of
That was
the
another
goats?
one of it. That was in this.
Okay, yeah, so I was
That was
distracted.
26.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about the interruption.
That's all right. Okay. So at any rate, we're going on here. There isn't any Rashi on this until verse 30. So we're just going to keep going. Unless somebody has a question, let me know. Kol ish ve'isha, each and every man, asher nadav libam otam, whose hearts prompted them, lahavi, to bring, lachol hamelacha, for any of the work to be done, right, in constructing the tabernacle. Asher tziva Hashem la'asot b'yad Moshe, which the Lord had commanded to perform through Moses. Heviu b'nei Israel, the children of Israel brought nedava l'Hashem. So in this case, I think we would translate it as a free will offering to the Lord. They were commanded to construct the tabernacle, but as to how they were going to do it in terms of who was going to donate the various raw materials, etc., that was up to them, completely free for them to decide. Next, Vayomer Moshe el bnei Israel, Moses said to the children of Israel, Ra'u, see, kara Hashem b'shem, the Lord has called by name. In other words, he's specified Bezalel ben Uri, son of Uri, ben Hur, the son of Hur, the Matei Yehuda, for the tribe of Judah, from the tribe of Judah. And of course, we had read this in Parsha Ki Tisa. So again, we're now there. God had told Moses to select Bezalel, and here Moses is telling the Israelites that Bezalel has been selected. And Rashi has an interesting little factoid here. So son of Hur. Hur has been mentioned before, but now we are told that, in fact, B'nah shel Miriam haya, that Hur was the son of Miriam. Just a little thing to tuck away in terms of if you have to play Trivial Pursuit and that question comes up.
I was just reading, and Kitisa, there's a midrash that Hur was killed by the people because he tried to stop them from building the golden calf. Correct.
He and Aaron both and when the story goes that the reason why Aaron relented and built the golden calf, right, because that's a huge piece of irony, right, is that he saw how the people had killed Hur. And he felt that since he had been selected to be the high priest, that if they killed him, they would have killed a high priest, which would be even worse. And that's why he went.
And he was probably scared too.
Well, that's something you can decide for yourself. I'm just telling you the tradition.
If he saw murder, the crowd was not only angry and scared, but murderous.
So nothing is mentioned in the text, okay, that he was scared. There's nothing in the tradition that I'm aware of. There's nothing that we see about that. So I tend to take those things at face value. I realize, obviously, you could argue that he was frightened, but this is.
I thought it was a stall tactic.
It was, because he told them to remove the rings and the earrings from their wives. He tried to stop them.
But we're still left with the question of why in the world did he agree to this? And if we find out that actually his ally Hur had just been murdered, I think it helps me understand why Aaron would agree to build the golden calf.
Okay, and I'm saying that's fine. That's not in the text, and it's not in any of the interpretations that I've seen, in the traditional interpretations. And the traditional, because that's a very simple explanation to give, and yet nothing is mentioned about it. On the other hand, I think it tries to, if he had simply been scared, then was he in fact worthy to be the high priest? And there's also traditions, and I'm glad in a way you're raising this, because I suspect this is a question that, and a suspicion that many people might have, that the job of the high priest was actually a very dangerous job. And in fact, we know that I have read that the reason why Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, were killed had to do with the fact that he had created the golden calf. But we might well ask a more difficult question, which is, if Aaron was the one who was responsible for building the golden calf on behalf of the people, why was he still high priest? Why wasn't that taken away from him?
Right.
I mean, it was the biggest act of betrayal on the part of the Jewish people that ever could happen historically. So why was he still high priest if he simply was scared? I mean, being frightened.
But how could he not have been scared?
Leadership quality.
I think we have to start from the assumption that he was human.
That's fine, but I don't know that we necessarily need to project. There are people who have courage, who have a sense of courage, and even, very often we have mixed feelings as to why we make any decision, that there's more than one simple reason. But I think that the reason why the tradition is telling us this is, in some ways, it's saying, all right, that he was a thoughtful person. I mean, when his children are killed, when Nadav and Avihu are killed, he doesn't fulfill an entire issue, one of the commandments involved in the dedication of the priesthood. And Moses is angry with him. And it says, Vayidom Aharon, that Aaron was silent. And basically what he says to Moses, what he does say to Moses after Moses gets angry with him, is he says, look at what's happened to me today. Would you really expect me to do this? So he does actually, there's this wonderful, it's in ParshaStudy, where Aaron responds to Moses, and Moses is satisfied with Aaron's answer. But I don't always like to make assumptions about people's feelings unless I know it for a fact. You have to be careful. You can have your suspicions based on our own experiences, but you know how you feel when people tell you what you're thinking. And it isn't necessarily what you're thinking. So while I understand, of course, why, the fact that Aaron saw that Hur was killed, okay, that we might say, well, he was afraid they'd take his own life. That is not a great leadership quality. You have to have some courage to be a leader, because you get so many criticisms and so much, brickbats hurled at you. So I appreciate where you're coming from totally, but I'm just saying, I think we have to be careful. At least this is where I'm coming from, and we can just agree to differ. Just
Rabbi.
Yeah.
And this is one of my pet peeves. Factoid really means it's not true.
Oh, I didn't know that. So
I know everybody thinks it's a little fact, but it's really the opposite of that.
Okay. Well, thank you for.
So I've just told the entire world that.
Okay. Okay. Well, if the entire world listens to this little,
there you go.
They'll know. But okay. I'll try and of course now I have to try and remember that.
Yeah, and it's hard not to use that. But
so should I say factual?
I don't know. Lauren would probably have a better word for that. I don't know.
Yes. All right.
Just a tidbit, know.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but thank you. I will try and remember that.
Okay.
Vayimale oto, right? So Moses is telling them about Bezalel. There's another little piece that's coming up that is really beautiful. Vayimale oto, God has filled him, Ruach, with the spirit of Elohim, with a divine spirit, Bechokhmah, with wisdom, Bitfunah, with understanding, Uveda'at, and with knowledge. And as vaYak'hel malacha, and regarding all the work that needs to be done, all the labor that needs to be done, specific labors. I thought this was interesting, that in some ways this is in reverse order, right? Because I think of knowledge as being an awareness of the facts, right, of the data. Understanding being the ability to process the data, and wisdom being the sum total of the process of a combination of knowledge and understanding and experience. And this is what you sort of wind up with, that this is so it's interesting that he starts off with wisdom, and then he breaks it up into understanding, and then finally with knowledge. Just an interesting, I thought. I think there is no more Rashi until 34. V'lachshov machshavot, to consider thoughts, right? To think thoughts, literally, right? To contemplate. La'asot, to fabricate. Bezahav, using gold, uvachesev, and silver, uvanachoshet, which is either copper or bronze or something like that. One thing we know is that it's a less precious metal than kesef. Uvacharoshet even, and to carve or to engrave stone, lemalot, in order to set for settings, I suppose we'd say. Uvacharoshet eitz, and carving wood, laasot, in order to fabricate, bechol melechet machashavet, to actually perform all the work of thought. In other words, I believe what he's saying is here, it's one thing to design, but it's also to fabricate the design is what he's saying here, what the text is saying. That he knows not only to think of the design, but how to actually bring the design to fruition. So this is some good stuff here in terms of how the language tries to describe the creative process. Ulahorot, lovely, and to instruct, right? And you can see here that the word Torah actually is related to lahorot. And so one way to translate the word Torah is instruction, capital I, and which gives you a sense of the purpose of the Torah, that God has given the Jewish people the Torah in order to instruct them as to how to live. And from that, you can also, I think, infer that the purpose of living is to learn. We're here to learn. Natan belibo, he put in his heart the ability to instruct. Interesting, right? Because we know that teaching, and many of you are teachers, right? That teaching isn't simply a matter of delivering information. There is so much more to it than just simply transferring information. And in a sense, I think that's the Natan Belibo part of this, that he gave him a character, that Bezalel had the kind of character where he could give instructions with clarity and in a way that people could understand and do it. Who? He, that is Bezalel. And here we go. For Oholiab ben Achisamach, Oholiab, the son of Achisamach, Lematei Dan, from the tribe of Dan. And Rashi, from tradition, points out something, I think, very charming and cool about this, that we all know about Bezalel, but we're not so aware of how much he was assisted by Oholiab, that Oholiab was, in a sense, the second in command, and that he is mentioned by name. And I'm going to let Rashi say what he's going to say. But Oholiab, okay, so he says, Oholiab mishevet Dan, right? We're told he's from the tribe of Dan. Min ha-Yerudin shebeshvatim. So the tribe of Dan had one of the lowest status amongst the tribes, right? We know how the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Ephraim were preeminent tribes. But there were, so there was a sort of a pecking order in these tribes, and Dan was one of the least in this level of pecking order, perhaps the least. Mibnei HaShvachot, they were descendants of the concubines, right? The Hishavahu Hamakom, and the Holy One made him his equal, the Bezalel, to Bezalel. So Hebrew likes to put in extra pronouns here. So essentially, you just simply would translate this as English as, and Scripture or God made him Bezalel's equal. It's a little bit more. L'melechet hamishkan, when it came to the creation, the work of the tabernacle. Vahu mi gedolei hashvatim, and of course Bezalel was from one of the greatest, one of the most preeminent tribes. L'kayem ma shenamar, and this is in fact to establish what is written in the book of Job, chapter 34. Velo nikar, and I'm going to guess that this is Shua, okay, lifnei dal. He doesn't, that is God, doesn't recognize the magnate, the wealthy person before the poor, that in God's eyes, they're equal. And so I think that the reason why the Torah gives these sorts of details is to give us life lessons in terms of modesty and humility and all in doing something so important. Sometimes we tend to, and I think rightly so, it's not that you don't want to honor the wealthy, but sometimes it's they alone get recognition and others do not because they simply aren't that wealthy. And we want to be careful about that kind of thing. It all has to do, I believe, with character. Going on. Just want to make sure I finished up to there. Yeah, we have another verse. Milei otam, he filled them, God filled them, chochmat lev, with wisdom of the heart. Okay, la'asot, to perform, kol melechet, all the work or service, charash, this would be engraving, carving, v'choshev, and skilled craft, right? Or designer, v'rokem, that would be, I believe, a weaver, or possibly rikma is actually embroidery, right? An embroidery. But chelet, there's a dot missing there, in the blue, uva argaman, and with the purple, betolat hasheni, the crimson yarns, uva shesh, and the fine linen, the oreg, and oreg would be, ariga is knitting. Or say, Shirabeth, please correct me if I'm mistranslating this here.
I was going to guess that it's weaving, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Chabad puts weavers.
Yeah, I know you'd think that, right? But isn't ariga in modern Hebrew knitting?
But
No, that's sriga with a samech.
Sriga. Okay, so that's why I made the confusion. Thank you. I'm glad I asked you to correct me.
Like srugim. Was this the knit a kippot?
Exactly.
Yes,
srugot. Right.
Yeah, kippot. Thank you.
So
oreg is weaving, and I'm going to put it.
It means sriga actually could be knitting or crocheting.
And for the other word, it says embroiderers.
Where is that?
You said embroidery, but it was
rokem. That's it. Rokem.
Embroiderer. Sorry.
Yeah, rukma is embroidery. Rokem is an embroiderer. Okay. So ariga, it's weaving. I just for some crazy reason. I just didn't remember, and I'm trying to get this to, hold on a second. Here, okay. Let's see if this will work. I'm trying to get, I want to write it in, and for some reason it's not letting me do it. I'm looking to see. Normally it'll allow me to do it, but for some reason it's not. All right, it'll allow me to type in the, oh, here it is. Sorry, I just found it. Does Bob say weaving? So anyway, we'll leave it that way. Or say chol malacha. Now we're going to go back into the general statement, right? We had some specifics. The performance of any of the work or the service, the choshvei machshavot. I would call that designing, right? Something like that. Thinking thoughts. And now we go on. I believe this is the fourth iteration. That was the instructions to do it up here. And now we have the gathering of the raw materials. Remember, I told you we go over this and over this and over this again. So let's keep going a little bit more. Actually, why don't I pause here and allow you to, if any of you have any thoughts or comments, I'd be happy to take them. Sorry, I'm buzzing this along here. Okay, let's see if I can do this, just to put in the place where we are for tomorrow. Very good. Okay. So I'm going to stop the share and give you a chance to comment if you'd like.
I was wondering, Rabbi, where they got all that material when they were slaves. Did they get it from the Egyptians, the gold and the silver and the crimson and so forth and so on?
We are told essentially that the Egyptians were in such a hurry to get them out of Egypt that they basically loaded them up. They basically, I'm not even sure if there's a verse that in a sense essentially says they despoiled the Egyptians. So they schlepped all of this along.
And wow. What, and the acacia wood, they got that from the Egyptians too.
So yes, I think we would have to say that. They somehow were able, taking all of this stuff along with them. And they left.
You never know what you're going to need.
That's right.
Yeah. And where did they get the
along with the toothbrushes and right, the all-important toothbrush? Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Harlan. You were going to.
They told me about. I think in the Torah, there's something about worms that these worms have certain dyes in them to dye the cloths, to make them crimson and gold and purple and
scarlet.
Blue.
I think it's the scarlet tolat shani.
Okay, so the only thing I'm aware of is, and this isn't in the Torah, is the chilazon, right? That sounds like, I believe it's Tyrian purple. That's the color of the tzitzit. But as to other, I could be just mistaken, and my memory, of course, can always be faulty. But I don't believe it tells you, where they got the colors. At least in the Torah, it doesn't tell you. Now, of course, it says tolat shani, and that they talk about that as, crimson. And tolat does mean a worm in other contexts. So it could be that the red color came from a worm, or, I was tempted to translate tolat as silk, because that also comes from a silkworm. And I suspect
there is
that
a little larva thing that red color still comes from. The word begins with the C. It's kind of more of a bug than
is it pronounced cochineal?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And it's more of a bug than a worm, but it's maybe worm shaped because it's kind of a larva.
Any of you ever killed a spider mite?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're little
I
red things,
did.
yeah.
Tiny little red things that give a big blotch on your paper when you smack them.
Right.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording at this point and look forward to hopefully that people will be interested in further exploration of these passages.